Have you started a small business and you're not really sure on all the things that you need to lodge on an annual basis? Have a look at this list that I'm going to provide to you. So number one, let's start with ATO. So what do we need to lodge with the tax office and what do we need to prepare? So the first thing we need to do, of course, is business activity statements. So that's basically to deal with your GST, your employees tax, which is PAYG withholding, and your income tax for the business that you're running. What else you have to look at is your tax returns, your income tax returns for the business. So how much profit, how much assets and liabilities. You basically need to provide all the information on how much tax you need to pay. What other stuff you need to provide for the tax office is your fringe benefits tax return. So if you're getting any personal benefit from the company that the company is paying for, such as entertainment, employee car, then you should be looking at FBT tax returns as well. So those are lodged around 31st of March. That's basically when we start doing the preparation for your FBT return. Taxable payments annual reports is also something that needs to be lodged depending on what industry you operate in. So normally that's lodged in August, and it's for industries and companies that are in construction, cleaning, and soon it's going to be into other industries as well. But so far, those are the industries that you need to lodge TPARs with. If you're employing anyone, then you have to look at PAYG payment summaries and single touch payroll that's coming over in 1st of July. So you basically need to lodge the tax that you've withheld for your employees, as well as how much wages you pay to them and superannuation as well. So those are the things you need to look at with the tax office. Going on to the next thing, which is ASIC. ASIC basically governs your company and your small business. So if you're running your small business through a company, then you have to follow the rules and regulations and compliance work that you need to do for ASIC as well. You have to pay around $263 on an annual basis just to keep the company registered. The date for that just depends on when you set up the company. What you also need to look at is on a yearly basis, you need to look at if the business has the ability to pay off its debts. So what ASIC requires for you to do is meet with all the directors of the company and decide, all right, does the company actually have enough money to pay off its debts? That's basically a solvency thing that they need to look at. And normally you'll create a minute of that meeting and just note that down that yes, the company has enough money to pay off its debts. Another thing you need to look at with ASIC and ASIC requires is that you have to have up-to-date financial records for the business. So that's normally what they call financial reports. It doesn't have to be a very specific financial report, so you can look at special purpose financial reports that are created by accountants. So accountants normally prepare a balance sheet, a profit and loss at the end of every financial year, which is 30 June. What else you need to look at is if the company actually changes their details. So for example, a director resigns or a director changes its details in terms of address, then you would need to update that information with ASIC. So you have usually around 28 days to update that information with ASIC. So what else do you need to look at? So we've dealt with all the government bodies, but there is also another one that you need to look at, which is insurances. Insurances is a big deal with small businesses as well. You actually need to lodge a few forms and prepare some information for your insurances. One such insurance that you need to deal with is workers' compensation. You need to actually look at filling out details of how many employees you have, how much money you're planning to pay these employees on an annual basis, and lodge that with iCare, for example, for New South Wales. But there are different types of government authorities based in different states. So the New South Wales one is called iCare. So you'll have to lodge your workers' compensation declaration with your wages and your estimated wages for the year. Another thing you need to look at if you're renting, so for example, if you're renting an office, you'll need to look at public liability, which is insurance to cover your business as well. So that's one more thing you need to look at when it comes to insurances. So another thing you need to look at if you employ people is pay slips. You need to actually give these pay slips by law to your employees. So if you're paying your employees on a weekly basis or a fortnightly or monthly basis, you need to ensure that your payroll system can give these people pay slips. Another thing you need to do as well is pay your superannuation. So small businesses will employ employees and they need to, by minimum requirement, pay the superannuation for the employees every 3 months. So that's every quarter. And the last few things that we need to look out for, which is payroll tax, land tax, and registrations and licenses. So what I mean by payroll tax is that if you employ a certain amount of employees and you pay roughly over $800,000 for New South Wales, then you need to actually pay some payroll tax for employees that you've paid for. Another thing you need to look at is if the business itself owns land and the land is actually worth quite a fair bit of money, there may be land tax that you need to pay as well. So you need to go and speak to the right government authority and find out more information in terms of how to assess your land and how much tax you need to pay for land tax. The last thing that we were talking about is registrations and licenses. So depending on your industry, so for example, construction, you'll need licenses to do what you need to do. So most likely you need to report your work experience, the amount of studies you've done, and that will need to gauge on if you should be able to get this type of license and how much work you need to do for those licenses. So I know I spoke a lot and there was actually quite a long list. So what I want to do right now is actually provide a whole list and an article. So I'll post that link down below or above. And then what you guys can do after that, if you guys still have any issues, is give us a call or send us an email, and then we'll have a look at all that stuff for you guys and go through it with you if you need to. So feel free to let me know.